Follow my YouTube channel for more heart-touching stories. Once upon a time, there was a man who owned everything money could buy. His name was Charles Whitmore, a billionaire who lived in the quiet, gated neighborhoods of Kensington, in a mansion that looked like it belonged in a film. Marble floors, gold-framed paintings, crystal chandeliers, and a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes. He was the CEO of a major investment firm and had made his fortune buying and selling things other people only dreamed of. Yet, with all his wealth, Charles carried something inside him he didn't understand, an emptiness that followed him like a shadow. He smiled at parties. He clinked glasses with politicians. He nodded in meetings. But when the lights went out and silence filled the hallways of his grand home, he felt like a ghost wandering through his own life. One cold December morning, just days before Christmas, Charles took a different route to work. His driver, James, had suggested it after hearing about protests blocking off the usual way. The streets they passed now were a world away from Kensington: narrow, cracked pavements, buildings with peeling paint, small corner shops with handwritten signs. As they slowed near a traffic light, Charles noticed something odd. A young boy was sitting alone on a stone bench near an old bus stop. He couldn't have been more than 10. He wore a faded red hoodie, ripped at the sleeves, and trainers that had clearly seen better days. In his hands, he was holding a paper cup and a crumpled drawing. People passed him without a second glance. There was something about the boy's face, serious, but not broken. Tired, but not defeated. Charles stared longer than he meant to, lost in thought, until the light turned green and they drove away. That evening, Charles returned home and poured himself a glass of wine. But the boy's face haunted him. He sat by the fireplace and stared into the flames, remembering something he hadn't thought of in years: his own childhood. Not many people knew this, but Charles hadn't always been rich. He had grown up in a small flat in Sheffield, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to put dinner on the table. He remembered hunger. He remembered shame. He remembered the kindness of a neighbor who once gave him a toy car on his birthday when his mother couldn't afford one. The next day, Charles surprised his driver. "I want to go back to that same street," he said. James looked at him through the rearview mirror. "The one near the Old Town Market?" "Yes." "Where we saw the boy." The car rolled slowly along the familiar path until they found him again. Same bench, same hoodie, still clutching that drawing. Charles stepped out of the car and walked towards him. The boy looked up, slightly alarmed, but not afraid. "Hello?" Charles said. "What's your name?" "Eli," the boy replied. "You don't need to give me money. I'm not begging." "I didn't think you were," Charles said with a faint smile. "What's that you've got there?" Eli held out the crumpled drawing. It was a rough sketch of a house, a small one, with smoke curling from the chimney and a garden full of flowers. It was clearly done by hand, but it had charm. "It's my dream house," Eli said. "Someday I'll build it." Charles knelt down slowly. "That's a big dream." Eli shrugged. "Dreams don't cost anything, right?" Charles chuckled, the sound surprising even himself. "No. I suppose they don't." For some reason he couldn't explain, Charles asked Eli if he was hungry. The boy hesitated, then nodded. They walked to a nearby cafe, nothing fancy, and sat in the corner while Eli devoured a sandwich and hot chocolate like he hadn't eaten properly in days. Charles asked where he lived. Eli told him about a hostel where his mum stayed when there was space, and the times they slept at the station when there wasn't. His father had left when he was 4. His mother, a cleaner, worked nights. Eli stayed near the bus stop during the day, hoping she'd come back early, but mostly just waiting. Charles listened quietly. It had been a long time since he had really listened to someone. That evening, after dropping Eli off safely, Charles returned home. His mansion now felt bigger, colder, and painfully quiet. The silence no longer comforted him, it gnawed at him. He walked past his expensive paintings, his Italian sofa, his £10,000 coffee machine, and suddenly none of it mattered. He couldn't sleep. So he wrote a letter. Then made a few phone calls. The next morning, Charles arranged for Eli and his mother to move into a small, clean flat not far from where they had been staying. He paid 6 months' rent in advance and told the landlord to keep the family's identity private. Then he visited Eli again, not as a rich man doing charity, but as a friend. Eli lit up when he saw him. Over the next few weeks, they met often. Charles brought him sketchbooks, pencils, even model kits to build miniature houses. He wasn't trying to impress the boy. In fact, for the first time in his life, Charles felt like someone else was impressing him. Eli's ideas, his imagination, his hope despite everything, it reminded Charles of something he had forgotten, that the most beautiful dreams often grow in the darkest places. Christmas came, and Charles invited Eli and his mother to a quiet dinner at his home. It was awkward at first. His grand house was nothing like the world they knew, but Charles insisted they just enjoy the meal. And they did. They laughed. They shared stories. Charles found himself listening to Eli talk about his dream house as if it were a real project. That night, after they left, Charles looked out the window at the snowy London streets and realized he hadn't felt this human in years. Months passed. Eli began attending a local school. Charles arranged for a tutor to help him catch up. The boy excelled: maths, science, even architecture. He was a natural. His mother, too, found steady work at a small bakery, thanks to Charles's quiet recommendation. But the most amazing thing was how little Eli changed. He didn't become spoiled or demanding. He remained kind, humble, and full of wonder. One day, at age 14, Eli handed Charles a new drawing. "This one's for you," he said. It was a sketch of a small wooden cottage in the countryside, with warm lights inside, and 2 chairs on a porch. A simple place. Peaceful. Nothing like the cold marble halls of the mansion. Charles stared at it for a long moment. "I think I'd like to live in a house like that someday," he said quietly. Eli smiled. "Then we'll build it together." Years went by. Eli grew taller, wiser, stronger. With Charles's support, he won a scholarship to study architecture. He designed shelters for the homeless as part of his university thesis. Every Christmas, he and Charles would still meet for dinner. Same tradition, no luxury, just connection. When Charles turned 70, he stepped down as CEO. He sold his shares, donated most of his fortune to educational programs, youth housing, and vocational training for underprivileged children. No interviews. No media. Just impact. People asked why. He always said the same thing. "I met a boy once, sitting on a bench with a crumpled drawing. He taught me that true wealth doesn't sit in bank accounts. It lives in the hearts we help, the hands we lift, and the lives we touch." Charles eventually moved to a quiet cottage in the countryside, not far from Oxford. And yes, it was designed by Eli. 2 chairs on the porch, as promised. One evening, now older and gray, Charles sat outside, sipping tea as the sun dipped low. Eli, now a successful architect, joined him. They sat in silence for a while, until Eli said softly, "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" Charles smiled. "You said dreams don't cost anything." Eli nodded. "You helped mine come true." Charles looked at him, eyes misty. "And you gave me something far greater. You gave me a reason to live again." And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the money. Not the titles. Not the empire he once ruled. But one boy. One drawing. One heart that reminded him what it means to truly be rich. Moral: true wealth is not measured by money, but by heart. Ek.